right? If you're the outsider, you're like a consultant, right? So
Right.
you know,
Yep.
there's no,
It's always easier to fix somebody else's business
yeah,
than your
exactly.
own.
Yeah.
So
You don't have any skin in the game, so to speak.
that's true. I figured that out once when I realized that many of the therapists that I knew, some
Mhm.
of whom I thought I highly regarded,
Yeah.
were complete train wrecks. Some of them in
Oh
their own
yeah,
personal lives, and you think,
absolutely.
how can that be?
Oh,
It
yeah.
seems as though you would be
Well put
totally,
together.
yeah,
Yep.
but no, not so much.
No.
So
Yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head. It's like everything's rose. It seems grass is greener type thing,
sure.
right? It's not. Everyone's got the same damn problems.
Yep.
Everyone's got the same malfunction of some sort.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the Jordan Peterson. I'm a big
Yeah.
Peterson fan. Um, he says often, life is suffering. Life is pain. Life is, there are challenges. There are bad things that happen. Um, it isn't all rosy and wonderful all of the time,
That's
but in a
right.
way, you need that to some degree, because if you don't have enough of that, everything begins to kind of blend together, and you lose perspective on what is good.
Yeah.
I mean, we look back on our um, like in years past, and you always lament, or rather you look nostalgically at how things were, and you think, oh, things were so much nicer, simpler, easier back then. They
No.
weren't. They
No.
weren't. But you had probably a better perspective on what happiness meant. It didn't have to be. Today we just have things so good in so many ways that I think when something bad happens, it's like, oh my God, it's devastating. And
Right.
at the same time, not enough bad stuff happens, so we don't really appreciate the good the way
Yeah.
we used
Yeah. First world problems, that sort of thing.
to. That's a much more concise way to put it.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, it's like for instance, right now, like everyone's complaining, right? Everyone's kind of like on pins and needles, on the edge of their seat, and hearkening back to the good old days, which was only a couple of months ago, um, about how great it was then to be able to do those things. But then when you think back to that, you had the same problems. It was just in a different form.
Right. Right. Yeah. And you
Now,
had
now,
many other problems that you don't have right now.
mhm,
That I mean, for some people, losing their job might not be, a good thing. For most, I would imagine, is not. But a couple months ago, you might have been talking about how much you hated your boss, or you hated your job, or you wanted to change jobs, or something like that.
yeah,
So yeah, I mean, I don't know that in the hierarchy of things, I would choose one over the other. I would choose to lose my job versus just to bemoan it with my friends on a weekend.
right,
But yeah, there's just a different swath of challenges and things going on.
yeah,
But this whole thing is a mess.
it
It's a
is.
disaster.
Well, the I think that the problems all lie within us, right? What was that one Michael Jackson song, "Man in the Mirror"? Right? Yeah, the problem is not external; it is an
Right.
internal problem, and it starts with the individual. My wife said it best, a little while ago. We were having an argument in the kitchen, me and my daughter, and it's like, we've all got problems, and you've got yours. That's true. That's
Hmm.
absolutely 100% correct. At the end of the day, when we close our eyes to sleep and we're inside, we're still stuck with our problems.
It's true.
And those need to be tackled first. I think once you address what that is, everything else becomes, I don't know, not easier, but more manageable.
Well, I think it's because if you're um, if your clothes are on fire, it's very hard to do anything else that's productive, right? Because it's consuming. So I think the same can be said for your own issues, your own challenges personally. If you can manage those, or at least you have some grasp on that, I think it gives you some freedom to then tackle things externally.
Yeah.
I've witnessed that with a lot of people who are despondent or who are just overwhelmed, and they're always seeming to struggle with everything. A lot of times it's the common thread that I've seen with those people is they have absolutely no control over their own life, and they have no so what they tend to do is just focus outward and think, well, these are things I can fix, so I'm
Yeah.
going to focus on those things and ignore my own problems. And in the end, what happens is you can't fix those external things because you can't focus on them and you can't see them clearly enough because of your own personal situation.
That's right.
And it's a tough situation, but it's very, very common, I think.
Yeah. The mental health of people right now is severely undermined
Yeah.
at the moment.
And it's one of the casualties of this that isn't getting enough attention. We shut down the economy and we sent everybody home thinking that it was the best thing to do for public health. And I'm sure there were advantages to it. But, I studied economics my whole life. So I tend to look at everything through that kind of a lens. And in economics, you always have to consider at what cost, because everything is in lieu of something else.
Right.
And there are consequences to this. There's economic consequences, but there's also public health consequences.
Yeah.
Addiction is up.
Drinking is up, apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
And
recreational drug use is up.
Yeah.
I would imagine domestic violence is up as well.
It is. It is. And if you consider that 80,000 people or so died last year from opiate overdoses, that's a staggering amount. And it could very well be more with all of this, because you have people who, recovering addicts are creatures of habit.
Mm-hmm.
And, the whole, I've never been a drug addict or anything like that, but I have seen people wrestle with this. And the one thing that gets them out of it is a solid routine. It's changing habits and then staying in that routine.
Right.
And when something bad, major happens that throws it out of whack,
they revert.
It's very easy to revert back to that. And that's going to be, unfortunately, a casualty of a lot of this. And then you couple the fallout of job losses, because every day that this goes on, there's more businesses that will never return.
Yeah.
And it's I'm a free market guy. So when businesses fail, I think there's somewhat of a Darwinian effect in the marketplace. But this is not that. These are not natural forces that we're putting on the market. So
sure.
Yeah,
Strange
times.
Let me let's start the podcast.
Yeah.
We're
I thought we already kind of started.
Yeah.
So
we're starting. No, I gotta give the intro.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Jae Choe show episode. I can't remember. COVID-19 Zoom edition. I am here with Mr. Rob Arturi of the Elevate Polk podcast, as well as many other things.
A few.
Welcome, my friend, to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah.
Great to be here. You did our podcast, so
yeah,
it's a pleasure to return the favor.
I as soon as I did your guys' podcast, I returned home immediately and thought, I need to up my podcast room game. I need to up my equipment game, because you guys have got such a radical setup with Elevate Polk. I mean, it's like a radio booth, like a radio show, engineering kits and everything. I don't know. I don't know anything about that equipment. I'm pretty lo-fi when it comes to my stuff. But yeah, I left quite envious of your guys.
Well, so the truth is to that, I'm a bit of a obsessive with certain things, And, when you do a project, you want to, you constantly want to refine it. And I'm completely self-taught with all of that. So as you start in one lane, and then as you go, you look, well, there's another, I could do this, or I could use this, or this would help, or that would help. And it just kind of snowballs from there. I say all that because none of that is a substitute for good content and good
Yeah.
people and a good
Yeah.
show.
Yeah.
Right? All of that will enhance an otherwise good podcast. But I can tell you from a lot of ones that I've seen, they don't necessarily, that good equipment and a good recording studio does not a good podcast make.
That's right.
Have the,
you can buy all the tools,
right.
You can buy all the bells and whistles, but if you don't have the goods to begin with, it's
right. Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So you and Chris Ann Long do
Mhm.
a tremendous job with Elevate Polk, just highlighting businesses in general in Polk County, not just the city of Lakeland. And I've noticed that one thing that you guys have been doing really well during this time of COVID-19 is spotlighting more positive aspects of things going on around town. I know we started off the podcast today talking about just how difficult it is as an individual to manage themselves in this time where you're just holed up and you've got personal problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm of the opinion that all the challenges that we face as a country or a community aside, the most important one comes down to the individual. Whether it's a mental health issue, or whether it's a financial issue, what are the primary problems that a individual has? How can we tackle that? And I think that will lead to goodness spreading out. So from the inside out rather than from the outside in.
Yeah, I'm a big internal locus of control person. I think that is one of the biggest problems we have as a society overall, that we tend to look at every external factor before our own. And one of the, I think it's evident in everything that's going on right now too. There's an obsession with politics. Now, I love politics. I love talking politics, not as much as I used to because it's harder to do now. But what I found is that people tend to credit the politicians they like for all that is good and blame the politicians that they don't like for all that is bad, never realizing that in the grand scheme of things, these people have very little effect on your everyday life and your everyday happiness. And I don't understand it. Like I enjoy politics from I enjoy talking about policy. I'm not a politician fan person. I'm not an ideologue, and I don't do the political idolatry, but I do like talking about policies and their effects and things like that. But in the end, none of that really is like the moon and the tide with me being happy in my life. There are so many other things, and yet I see so many people consumed by that.
Right.
And
I'm not into politics whatsoever. I mean, I do have opinions about certain things, but whether am I a Democrat or am I a Republican or am I libertarian, I don't know. I think I check mark the boxes across the board on both sides. So I mean, when I see people getting really heated about politics, and about certain individuals, like President Trump, right? People
Right.
love to. I mean, he is a big target to be picked on social media, and I don't get it. I mean, yeah, is he laughable? I guess, right? But I think it's done purposefully at times to drive more attention to him.
Yeah, he's a great troll of the media. He knows how to. I think that's why some of them hate him so much, because they know what he's doing, and they have a Pavlovian response. They just cannot not take the bait.
Yeah.
And a lot of his criticism, I think, is self-inflicted. On a policy perspective, I think much of what he's done is sound. If you watch him on mute, it's rather stable and beneficial,
Mhm.
for the country. If you listen to the rhetoric, you can drive yourself mad, or maybe you love it.
He's
Either
not a
way,
statesman. It's obviously
no.
he's not a statesman. He's a businessman, I guess. Um, and it's funny now too to watch mainstream media. Now, of course, I don't have network television or cable for that matter. I get all my news from the internet, and it's funny to see other politicians kind of pop up now and play the same game almost.
Yeah,
Point in
right.
case, you know who I'm talking about, Mayor Cuomo, or no, it was a Governor Cuomo.
Governor
Governor Cuomo.
Cuomo.
Why did I say Mayor? Governor Cuomo. Um, it's like him and his brother news anchor on CNN.
Hmm.
They're playing this reality show game, and I think to myself, "Oh my God, this guy going to be running for presidency?" Because
Well, you got
it feels like that to me, like the game, this game that's being played that on television. I don't know.
oh, very much so. There's been a lot of talk from some people on that side that he should run as a running mate for Joe Biden, or he should run, in fact, as an alternate to Joe Biden
Mhm.
at the convention. I mean, let's be honest. People with there is something going on with Joe Biden that does not inspire confidence in a lot of people.
Uh, no, the a lot of things that I see are really bad, like
Yeah.
really negative stuff. Very scandalous stuff. And it has to do with him and be just being inappropriate with
Well, there's
members of
that.
the opposite sex. I'm just like, ooh, like,
There's that. Some of that is, unfortunately. So now there's a story that came out that um, it actually seems to have some degree of credibility. I don't know what happened, and I'm of the mindset. I watched the leftist media destroy Brett Kavanaugh. I don't know what happened with Brett Kavanaugh, but I'm an old law enforcement guy. So for me, I can have an opinion, I can have a hunch, but you have to wait for the proof, and that should be the search for truth is virtuous. Being on the right side politically doesn't really mean much to me, because I'm an issue centric person. With
mm,
Biden, I think he should get the same due process in the court of public opinion or whatever as anybody else. And I don't I don't want to rush to judgment with him. The problem that he has is he has this weird touchy feely way about him for
yeah,
a long time, and I think some of it is innocuous, but it is odd.
yep,
But now we have this accusation that's come out, and it's being handled very, very differently
mm,
than. And this is I find there's a huge amount of hypocrisy in how we deal with these things, and who's expendable and who's not. Harvey Weinstein was expendable for the cause, but apparently Joe Biden is not,
mm,
and that's weird to me. But for me, I lost my grandfather to Alzheimer's, and I'm watching Joe Biden talk, and he has a very hard time putting together a sentence, a
mm,
string of words, even when he has notes in front of him. And to me, it's almost gotten to the point where it's kind of sad. I don't say it because I've lived it in my personal life, and I've seen that and what that means for somebody that you care about. It's a very difficult situation. But what I don't understand is how some people can talk about the crazy things that Trump says and the way that he has these, like, I don't know, like this whole thing with the Lysol or whatever. I mean, that was
mm.
partially taken to another level by media, but he did say some things that were probably better to be said behind closed doors. But the man has like brainstorming sessions in front of the media,
In front of everyone.
right?
Yeah,
Which is not a good political practice, but it's hardly uh, incoherent or just the rantings of some maniac. Obviously, people talk to him about these things, and then as he's sitting there kind of spitballing about them in front of the cameras are rolling, and like, what are you saying? What is this? I mean, we've all done it. You sit around and you brainstorm, you have bad ideas, and you don't understand things as you're kind of working through something you until you kind of grasp it the right way. He just does this in front of everybody. He's the most transparent, I think, to a fault in many respects, when it comes to that. Biden, on the other hand, though, there's a level of incoherence there that is not just, it's not the same. It's very different.
Yeah.
And, you do worry about that. And I think that's that's something that I think honest people on both sides will admit. So yeah, with respect to Cuomo, they've talked about Cuomo. He's managed to spin this whole thing very well for himself, but he's made a couple errors. Recently he told people he was asked about what New Yorkers should do if they don't have a job. They've been out of work for weeks and weeks. And his response was, well, go get a job as an essential worker.
Yeah.
Assuming there were enough jobs, there were enough available essential worker jobs. If everybody just got a job as an essential worker, how is that any different than everybody just going back to work? I mean, when you think about it,
right.
You don't have social distance. So, it was a bit snide and I don't know. I'm not a big fan of.
I don't know if there was there was even a correct answer or a way to kind of answer that to satisfy everyone. So far as like, does everyone go back to work? Well, no. I mean, we're all. I mean, his point was we're just trying to protect each other by not going to work. Now, if you need a job, well, then there are jobs as being essential workers. But to your point, if everyone's going back as an essential worker, then why not everyone go back to work? Period. What's your opinion on going back to work here in the state of Florida? Well, let's back it up. How about here in Polk County?
Okay. My opinion is I have some pretty strong opinions on this. When we started out, there was I think a real need, because you have to evaluate choices based upon the information you had at the time, right? So it's hard to look back and then say, well, what we end up with now are people who are either scared or who are over judging the actions of the past. So in the beginning, with the estimations that we were given and the
largely grossly overestimated.
Yes, very, very much so. Yeah. But at the time, as an elected official making policy, that's what you're told, and you don't necessarily get to gamble with your own hunch.
That's right. And that doesn't place blame on our city officials or the government, for that matter. I mean, they're information. Well, what do you do? Yeah.
The mistakes that were made because as things unfolded, as time went on, and we began to learn more, we began to learn how much China had lied about so much in this process, how much the WHO kind of just parroted those, which gave credibility to it. And all of this that we were basing so many of our decisions on became irrelevant and just, nullified as time went on, when the numbers, those estimates of the models were revised downward multiple times, time and time again. Very little was done in terms of changing policy. Mm-hmm. It was like, well, the good news is the hospitals aren't overrun. We're not going to be short 40,000 ventilators in New York, and we don't need these 2 gigantic military ships. Again, great that they brought them.
Right.
But as the situation evolved, because it is dynamic, as it evolved, we should have evolved our policy along with it. Because if we knew now what we knew, if we knew then what we know now, our response might have been very different. Right.
But there was no way to know. There was no way to know
at the time. At the time, no, there was no way to know at the time. But now, as things go on, as information comes out, and we see what's really unfolding, it paints a very different picture. Okay, so where I lived in New York, where I grew up, is ate up with this. For every 1,000 people in my home county, Rockland County, New York, there are 25 positive cases of COVID-19. And in the state of Florida, it's like 1.3 in every 1,000 confirmed cases. And even then, the confirmed cases thing is misleading because it's only a function of testing.
Right.
So if you don't have as many people getting tested, but they're asymptomatic, or maybe they have mild symptoms and they think that they have it, but they didn't get a test and they're just home, they don't have any of the severe symptoms, are they even counted in this? So if I thought very early on, the only reliable estimation we have of how bad this is are hospital admissions, because the number of people going there, if a certain percentage of people have really bad symptoms, then you can figure out what percentage that is of the overall, and then
Right.
you can see. So if hospital admissions are going up and up and up, and ventilators are going, that's a better trajectory. But as you add testing, the numbers of cases will go up.
Right.
But if the adverse reactions don't, well, then you're just simply knowing, you're confirming more of what you already knew.
Mhm.
So I say all of that because as time went on, politics took over. And what politicians fear most is getting something wrong. So they look for opportunities to play it safe. And the biggest problem we had is we live in a federalist society, essentially. We under a federalist structure where the states have a lot of autonomy.
Mhm.
But what you notice is the president didn't shut down the country. He doesn't have the authority to, despite what he, you know, jokes about. There's a great meme that says Trump didn't shut the country down quick enough, and then Trump doesn't have the power to open everything back up, right? And that's one of those where you have to wonder, did he play that to show, you know?
Yeah.
But the truth is that uh, it's very easy for state governors to defer to the federal government
Mhm.
and say, well, we don't have to make the decision. We'll let Washington make the decision. And everybody did that. And then you look in the state of Florida, um, the vast majority of cases are in 2 counties in the southern tip of the state. But yet, counties all around the state are subject to the same draconian policies. To me, that doesn't make any sense. The same 25% of counties in the United States have 0 COVID cases. So we needed a more nuanced approach to how we're going to implement these things. But what we did was we painted with a broad brush. And that's where you sowed the division in the country and you caused these problems because a lot of it was unnecessary. New York,
Okay.
sure,
All right. So getting back to the question, do you think we should go back to work?
I do. Well, let me qualify that. I think that whoever wants to go back to work should go back to work. Whoever wants to open their business should open their business. Whoever wants to go patronize a business should patronize a business. And I've gotten a lot of heat from that because people accuse you if you say that publicly online. And I'm not one to back down from controversy. But if you say that online, people say you're just a greedy capitalist. You don't care about people's lives and all of this. So I ask one question: tell me scientifically, because they invoke the data gods or the science gods.
Sure.
I say, tell me one thing. At what point can we emerge and the virus is gone? When can we come out of the cave? You tell me, when can we come out of the cave and safely go about our lives and begin to resume these things without being the reckless and greedy people that you accuse me of being? And the truth is, nobody can answer that question because there is no answer, because this is not like a tornado or a hurricane where it'll just blow out in the Gulf and we'll go back to, to life. So we have to live with this. And that's different for everybody. If you're 90 years old, there's some different considerations than if you're 19. So I think I'm a big freedom person. So I think you should have the freedom to do these things, and you have the freedom to not do them if you don't want to.
Mhm.
But the idea that somehow going to the grocery store and packing in there is not causing any problems, but going into a small boutique, let's say in downtown Lakeland, that normally has maybe 2 or 3 people at a time on any given day,
Right.
just walking through there, that is somehow going to be the epicenter of a new hotspot is maddening.
Yeah, that's maddening. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. I don't have an answer to the question that I asked you. I don't have an answer to it. So if you were to ask me the same question, hey, do you think we should go back to work? I would say, I just don't know. There are certain metrics that I would like to see happen in the news. Like for instance, here in Lakeland, just a steady decline over the course of a week. right? Or maybe even 2 weeks. I don't know. I mean, if that were the case, then I would say maybe. Even that would be a maybe. Or would it
Let me
be,
ask.
be exactly the same as before, so far as being at the dojo and being in teaching classes and having students practice martial arts? I say no, not for a while. Ninja masks for everyone, right? More spaced out,
Sure.
less students per class, more spacing between classes to clean and disinfect.
But here's the problem. So a couple things. So first, what you're describing is what you as a business owner would also do to encourage people to come back when you reopen your business,
I
right?
encourage people to come back when they feel like they're absolutely comfortable with coming.
Sure, sure.
Not like, not blanket statement for everybody, hey, we're open, everyone should come back.
Sure.
No, no.
And I agree with you. I share that same sentiment because I don't believe that anybody should be forced to go back.
Right.
I think that we should be compassionate for that. There's a lot of scared people out there. I get it, and I'm not cold to their concerns and their fear. And I think you're right for how you're putting that. But I think you're also describing simultaneously the things that you would do to make them feel more comfortable, right? So as a business owner, you can do things to encourage people to up the level of confidence they have in returning.
Right.
Now, whether or not
make them feel more comfortable, but really making me feel more comfortable.
Well,
That's that it's again for selfish reasons. I want to know that I am doing the best I can to get to stay safe for
Sure.
not only me but my kids, my family, and for everyone else. Yeah.
But here's the thing: when people talk about the decline in the numbers, right? What that means, and this is why that metric is going to be very difficult to achieve. Because what were we trying to do in the beginning of all of this? We were trying to flatten the curve, right? So you had those two graphs. The one was Mount Everest, and the other one was just a big plateau.
Sure, little bubble.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
But that plateau was longer. It was spread out over a much longer period of time.
Right.
And if you really get mathematical, there's a negligible difference in the volume of the shaded area in the really tall graph and the one that's really flat.
Yeah.
Which means from the very beginning, we understood that there may be a little bit less, but long term, about the same number of people are going to get this.
Right. Yeah.
The only thing that we can hope to do is to spread out the rate of infection, flatten the curve, and make more people infected over a longer period rather than a tremendous number all at once. That was a sound.
So not to overburden the population or the hospital beds and ventilators.
Because if you do that, if you swamp the healthcare system, then you cannot treat either those with COVID or other emergent conditions. Yeah. Heart attacks, strokes, appendix rupture, all of these other things now become fatal that just 6 months ago were routine.
Sure.
People get stents put in their heart all the time. But if you have a healthcare system that is just totally overrun, those people start dying. So now it ends up being this catastrophic exponential problem. So the reason to prevent that from happening, I think, was sound and it was correct. But now we have to look at it, what are the next steps? And we have to accept the fact that there are people that are going to get infected for an extended period of time. This is not going anywhere until we achieve some degree of herd immunity. There's no way to protect the most vulnerable.
And I have a thought in my mind that COVID-19 coronavirus will be chalked up as much like the flu is, where it will be with us for a long time, for years and years on end, and it'll be classified like having the flu. Like, hey, the flu can be fatal, so the coronavirus can be fatal. That it will affect you differently than it'll be from individual to individual how it affects you. So I think it'll be much like the flu. As terrible as that is to say, but I mean, if it's going to stay with us for that long of a time, And whereas some of us are asymptomatic and some of us have just a little, just have a slight fever and a headache, and that's about it, and doesn't go further than that. But for others, hey, you got heart issues, you got, you're immunocompromised and so on. Well, I mean, is having the flu for someone that's immunocompromised, is that a make things worse? Doesn't it?
Sure.
Yeah, right. So I don't know. Yeah, I feel that it's going to be thought of in those terms eventually.
I agree. I think in the end, this may still end up being more deadly than the flu.
Yeah.
In terms of raw numbers, some of that is the result of the fact that we don't know what the denominator truly is right now. When you look around and you go, the fatality rate in Manhattan was like 7%, and in Florida it was like 3%. And then they did this antibody study in Miami-Dade County.
Oh, they already did one.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
They did. And they did random sample testing throughout Miami-Dade. And what they came up with was that about 15% of the population there probably had this at some point. And it lowered the fatality rate in Miami-Dade. If you extrapolate the numbers from that sample group, if you look at it, it went from 3%, which is just, if you go today to the Department of Health website and you look at the numbers and you just divide the number of dead divided by the number of positive tests, you get about 3%.
Right.
The actual fatality rate based upon Miami-Dade's estimations with the antibody test is about 0.1%.
Wow.
Now the flu, for perspective, is 0.01%. So 1 in 10,000 will die from the flu, but 1 in 1,000 will die from COVID under just the estimates that we have thus far. But right now it's 3 out of 100. So there's a big difference between, I think we'll have this and the flu. I think there's, to some degree, our ability to prevent it is, kind of the same situation. So we will have to deal with it.
I wonder if we could get a hold of, if people privately can get a hold of these antibody tests. Is that possible?
I don't know that it's well. Yes, it is possible, but they're not necessarily FDA approved. The FDA is allowing people to do these, to buy these tests, but they're not necessarily viable. The results. The problem that you have is
reliable. You mean?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
The testing process itself is not viable because you can't use it scientifically. They're just kind of there for, it's like your own edification, basically. But that's it. But with respect to the antibody testing, there's been a lot of suspicion about are there too many false positives, or how does this work? The truth is that it's a blood test, and if you're doing it on a presumptive level, the quality of the test really matters because they're not being done in a laboratory, being tested on the fancy equipment. It's just put a drop of blood on a stick, right? Now, that process can be very reliable. There are diabetics all around the country that do this on a daily basis,
right,
and they're quite accurate. But is this test at that point yet? I don't know. And which one is, which one isn't? It's hard to say.
I want to get the antibody test. I want the antibody test. I want to take it. I want to know that, hey, did I already have it? Am I building some sort of immunity to this? Right? Because I could have swore before the mass hysteria of coronavirus, I came down with something and it didn't feel like a normal flu,
right,
or a normal cold. It just felt just different. It felt a little, I don't know, strange. And
which is funny because I have some family in New York that both had it, husband and wife both had it, and that was how they described it. Weird. It felt weird.
Yeah. It was like for me, it was a week of slight headache, nothing terrible, just a slight headache, and then I thought I had a temperature, but then I kept measuring myself. Like, no, I don't have a temperature. Like, what is this? And it just came and it went. And that was it. And now this was before all the, hysteria.
Well, we know now that it's been here before we thought. that this is much earlier than
As in like
anticipated.
years before?
No, not years, but a couple months.
Okay.
And one of the reasons they think Miami was so bad was because of the Super Bowl being down there. So you had all these people, coming in from all over. It seems to be very travel centric, where you have areas of a lot of international travel, especially, but and population density. But what we didn't see, and this is the part where I think, again, we needed to look at a more practical approach. We were originally shown that like contagion map, like from the movie Outbreak, where it's just day 1, there's a little red dot. And then, day 30, the entire thing is just red and the country's on fire and everybody's dead.
Yeah.
Right?
That
Didn't
that
happen.
red bubble is just moving and expanding.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So in Westchester County, New York, for instance, the county just north of Manhattan, there were more cases, and they're right about even now with the entire state of Florida. Okay, now Florida is, I think, the 3rd largest state in terms of population. It surpassed New York, but more people in this one county have tested positive than the entire state of Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Yet the county just north of them, Putnam County, New York, had like 300 cases. So you go, wait a minute, like now Putnam is more of a rural county. It's not a, heavily populated, but you would still think that if it was that bad, just one county over, that we would just be ate up with it here. And we're not. And it doesn't, it doesn't really make sense how you can have that proximity, but not have that same penetrating effect. Mm-hmm. And again, with the social distancing thing, people say, well, that's because we're social distancing. Well, that was factored into the models, and it's still been revised downward and downward. Right. So the truth is, I don't think we don't know what we don't know about this.
Yeah.
But we have to be practical, because we're economically speaking, we're not going in a very good direction. This is a bad situation.
No. Yeah. Hey, can we talk about your significant other?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So your wife works for Ipsen or Ipsum?
Yep. Ipsum Diagnostics. Yes.
Ipsum Diagnostics. So they produce tests. One in particular, they have a test for the coronavirus, for COVID-19. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Which is fast, apparently.
Well, the test itself is what they call PCR, right? If you hear the news, poly something.
The preferred method of testing for coronavirus.
Right. So what you see in the laboratories and the hoods and the little pipettes and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. It's not like the rapid test that you're seeing that takes 15 minutes or whatever. That test is significantly flawed. So we're not hearing about as much about it as we used to. But the difference is, the laboratory that she works with it's called a reference laboratory. So they study genetic samples for analysis for different types of illnesses and obscure infections and things like that. In the beginning of the year, when this stuff first started coming about, this is a relatively new lab, and they kind of thought, this is an opportunity. Like, we think this might be a big deal. So they started putting energy into, if we're going to do testing for this, what do we need to do? We need to develop protocols for the machine that we use to test. We need to develop protocols so we can use that, get that approved by the FDA and the NIH, and all these pieces put together. So they bet the farm on COVID-19. And what happened is the testing equipment that's used by LabCorp and Quest is older, right? So this is like a Ferrari versus, let's say, a semi-truck. So an older technology, slower technology, but it's used on a massive scale, but it's cheaper. This lab is state of the art. There's only about 100 machines in the country that are like this. And none of them have been certified because there were no protocols until Ipsum wrote them. But what it allowed them to do was to test a sample in a matter of hours. And they could do turnaround of about 24 hours from the time that you swab the patient, overnight the samples, the lab does it throughout the night, and then they created an electronic portal to send the results. Yeah. And it was significantly faster than anything else that was out there because of both the nature of the test as well as the backlog that companies like Quest had that were taking almost 2 weeks to get results back.
Okay. So now is that test at your wife's company being used in the United States?
It's being used in the entire state of Georgia. So there's the state of Georgia Department of Health subcontracted with my wife's company to do their coronavirus testing.
Hmm.
They just put out a press release the other day thanking their partnership with Ipsum. Again, there's large hospital chains around the country that have partnered with them so they can send tests to Ipsum to handle those tests. So that the test that Ipsum is doing, they can handle 6,000 samples a day. They can test 6,000 tests they can do in a 24-hour period, and Georgia took about a third of that capacity with just their one, their one state. So yeah, it's being used everywhere. It's being used in this county as well. So I don't want to get into too many of the specific details. But,
Right. It's a bit infuriating to know that there are reliable ways, or seemingly reliable ways, to test this fast than what's being used here in Polk County.
Well, I will tell you this. I'll tell you this. I have struggled with this, and I've been increasingly more public on social media about it. About a month ago or so, I took this to Lakeland Regional and said, hey, listen, through some intermediaries, how can we get this in front of the people there? Because I'm selfish, because my wife's company was looking at larger hospital organizations that have 200, 300, 400 hospitals around the country, because those are much easier to onboard and to connect with. You could just hit it's a more birds, one stone. Lakeland Regional is one hospital, but because of the relationship here, because she works remotely and she doesn't even do any of this testing stuff on a normal basis. She works on the insurance contracting side. But because of the relationship here, we said, hey, listen, would they be willing to work with our local hospital? Because God forbid, me or anybody that I know needs to get a test, I'd like for them to be able to have that rapid testing.
Yeah.
So they said, sure, we'll work with them, no problem. So we took this and said, hey, listen, please reach out to these people. Let's put you in contact. We'll show you, and set up a conversation. But if you have a testing problem, and I kept hearing about this, if you have a testing problem, this might be one solution, right? There's no sale or anything to this. I don't make a dime from this. My wife doesn't make a dime from this. She's not in sales. Right. I don't even work for the company. But it was like, hey, listen, if this is bad as we think that it is, and testing is imperative, this is an opportunity. To this day, nothing.
You hadn't heard a thing?
Nope. Now, I took this other places in the county, and the response was very, very different. The response was, wow, so how much does it cost? Well, it costs the same as if you do the test for LabCorp. There's no enhanced cost. That they were blown away. Wait a minute. Because normally the Ferrari costs more than the Ford Taurus.
Yeah.
But the owner of the company looked at this as an opportunity to truly just do something good for mankind. And they can still make money on the test, charging basically the normal rate.
Yeah.
They charge the same thing. There's no machinery to buy. We're not selling them this $10,000 machine that they have to put on a desk someplace.
So these other hospitals took it. Oh, they have.
Oh yeah.
But not Lakeland Regional.
Correct. So other entities, other healthcare entities in the county had a very different approach and were recognized that this was another good weapon to have in the arsenal, and they jumped on it.
I would really like to know why that is.
Yeah, me too.
I would really like to know why, if there is this other test that is faster and reliable, just as reliable, why not? And the same cost, why not take it? I mean, it sounds to me like it's a financial issue, that it's almost like a contractual issue that's already been made prior to Corona or prior to COVID-19. That, hey, we're using these companies because we have a contract with these companies and we can't deviate. Otherwise, we're going to get penalized. We have to pay all this money, or that sort of thing. I don't know.
There are situations like that. But you have to remember too that when you look at it, so there are certain insurance companies that have exclusive contracts with different testing agencies, right? So Blue Cross uses, I think, LabCorp exclusively, right? And those are those things can happen, but it's based upon your insurance. But a hospital is going to work with all of them because you don't know which patient has which insurance. So if you go to LRMC and you need some sort of a test that they have to send out to do, they're going to send that based upon your insurance, not just who they have a exclusive relationship with. And they do many tests in-house, but they can't do any of this here. Besides, with an emergency declaration, all of that goes out the window. This is a public health emergency.
Right.
If they can do it, it doesn't matter. So they were sending testing samples to anybody that could do it. But there were, and here's my thing. If there were specific reasons, they said, listen, you know what, this sounds great, we appreciate it, but here's why we don't necessarily think that will work. I would respect that if they did have an opposition. I don't know what it could be, and I can only say that because of the response I've seen from so many other entities that had a very different approach to it. But by the same token, I would at least respect the fact that they would say that. All I've heard from listening to briefs for the city commission, et cetera, are conflicting explanations on what level of readiness is or isn't. It just doesn't make much sense to me. I've heard that the LRH said that they had talked to some private labs, but there were issues with capacity and turnaround time, which completely flies in the face of the fact that there were no issues with capacity and turnaround time. If they needed tests today, Ipsum can send them out 1,000 tests today. Yeah. And you can do them, send the samples right back. So again, it's a challenge for me because, again, this is nothing about personal gain. This isn't my business. I don't stand to gain anything from that other than this was an opportunity that I saw for our community because of my wife's relationship to this lab. And the lab is in Atlanta, so it's not even anywhere around here. But I saw the opportunity, and we wanted to bring that to to our community.
Right. So the response was crickets.
Yeah. They did speak with them.
Oh yeah. Okay.
They did. And then basically ghosted. So, again, I don't know. It's
hopefully
very perplexing.
There's a rationale. Hopefully there's just a good reason as to why that is. I don't know.
Maybe there's no need, right? So let's assume that there's no need, and that testing is being done rapidly, and there's no backlog, and there's no issue at all, right? If that's the case, I can understand that if there's no need for it. The problem I have is that every briefing that I heard, we kept hearing about the importance of testing. So you cannot say at one point, we need more testing. We're worried about access to testing. I mean, from a federal level on state and local, everybody's concerned about testing. And Lakeland Regional has a drive-through testing facility set up over by the Civic Center or the RP funding.
Yeah.
Well, that's great, except how long does those samples take to get back? So there's two components to this. It's not just the swabbing of your nose. It's where does that sample go?
So who here in Lakeland, who has the Ipsum test?
Government.
Oh.
As much as I can say.
Okay. All right.
But suffice to say that it has been a point of contention for me, not because I don't feel rebuffed. Again, I don't even work for the company. I have no skin in the game. I don't stand to benefit from any of this personally, but I am very disappointed in, I think, the level of attention. I think that people deserve better. And as you said, if it doesn't work, they deserve some kind of explanation as to why. And all we've gotten is conflict. And that sort of thing does not engender a lot of confidence at a time like this.
No, it certainly doesn't. Hey, I think people are pretty damn tired of COVID and Corona and the talk ad nauseum of it, and we're both guilty of the same as
Sure.
we sit here and muse about it. Let's talk about some good news.
Nice.
You got any good news?
Um, you know what? I have spent much of this time devoting some of my free time to working with local businesses that are really, really hurting.
Hmm,
Thankfully, obviously, my wife works for the lab. Lab is doing quite well in this time,
sure.
and my other businesses are doing fine, um, and are kind of insulated from this as well. So I'm in a different position. I'm extremely motivated because of the people that I see, and one of the things though that I've seen in this process is a tremendous response from the community. You know, Chrisanne and I on our podcast, we did one episode that never aired, and it was because we were both frustrated with different things, different aspects of this whole situation. And you mentioned it earlier. We kind of try to focus on the good,
Yeah.
and we did the episode, and it was cathartic for us. But afterwards, we both said this: we
You're not,
can't ever, we can't,
see,
because it's
you can't do that. You got to air it.
well,
You got to air it now. You got to air it now.
it's gone. And let me tell you why. There's nothing earth shattering. There's nothing really that would make you go, wow, there's some story here. It's just our goal with the podcast was to, well, as corny as it sounds, elevate Polk. It was to raise the standard of conversation, was to raise the expectation for ourselves and our community. And we weren't accomplishing that in that context. We like to have fun. We like to talk about issues, even tough issues, but we want it always to be with purpose.
Got it.
And that was the issue there. So I say that because subsequent to that, what we chose to do was to focus on those positives. So the good news for me is I have seen a tremendous amount of support and community going on a daily basis within our local business community. And at a time where people are divided, the business community is really cohesive, and it's been an incredible thing to watch. So that for me is a win in this mess.
Got it. So on a positive note for all this is twofold. The relationships that we have within our family, within our realm of living. For me, my wife and kids being at home, stuck together. I think this was a real opportunity to shed light on the good and bad things about us. And I think that's happening from household to household. It's almost an unveiling of what may have been largely ignored about our family dynamics.
Would you say that the quarantine has been like one gigantic collective intervention?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. That's a great way to put it.
You can't leave.
Because you can't leave. There's no escape. There's no escape now, right? So that's the first one. The second one is basic health, individual health. So, man, I've never seen so many people post their home workout photos and videos, right? The metrics that they use on their app about the exercise they got today,
right?
And home gyms being set up and all that. I mean, it's still no substitute for having a real gym and all, but great. Everyone's kind of focusing on their health and their relationships. I think that's if there's one thing to come out of that is the unveiling of those things. And I hope that stays strong when everyone gets back to work.
I do too. I do too. I think regardless, we're going to need it, because every bit of personal fortitude and stability and additional bandwidth that we're able to get from this collective pause and self-reflection is going to be necessary for what comes next and climbing out of the bucket.
Yeah.
And I think that, as crazy as that sounds, that is going to be worse than the quarantine portion of the event, right? You know, if you've ever had major surgery, sitting there in the waiting room, waiting to get called back, laying there in the hospital gown, all of the anxiety that goes along with that, as bad as that might seem, it's usually the worst part is the recovery process.
Yeah.
And I don't not say, I'm not trying to be fatalistic about it, but it is going to be a challenge long term. And I think those things that you talked about definitely do play into individuals having a better opportunity to succeed with that.
Yeah.
I think you need that.
Yeah. Hey man, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on your show, and best of luck to you guys. If you guys ever need anything, you know how to get a hold of me. How to get a hold of you? Elevate Polk podcast is what's the URL for that?
ElevatePolk.com.
ElevatePolk.com. There it is. All right. Thanks, Rob. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks, Jay. It's good to talk to you.
All right. See ya.
See ya.